I heard you you cooperate with Ashoka.
Me? Yes, I do. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my screen suddenly. Not entirely sure what is going on. This is not ideal. Let me. Okay. Yeah, no, I can see the camera's working. It's just that I can't keep the camera. The screen doesn't. My email keeps popping up in front of the Zoom. But that's good. I think I've sorted it now.
I got information from the UK, Ashoka, and they told me that you cooperate with them.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I've been a fellow for 20 years, something like that.
Yeah, oh, it's an amazing organization, Ashoka. I really, it's one of the great privileges, I think, in my life at the moment is being involved with Ashoka. I found it so inspirational, the people who I've met through Ashoka and what they're doing and the systems change they're focused on. Just extraordinary, really amazing. It's the kind of thing that makes you feel better.
Yes, absolutely. Even though I'm going to write a book about how do we have become clowns.
I know you said that the other day. Makes me feel very depressed because I think there's some fantastic work going on with social entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Have you met Bill Raydan?
I have, yes. I mean yeah, amazing.
It's amazing. Yes, I have met him several times. I was in Spain with him in a 1 week tour. That was something. We are trying to raise money for Ashoka Europe, and so I was with him trying to convince some of the bankers and a lot of other people to invest and to put money in Ashoka, and it was quite an experience. I mean, to be in a week with Bill Raydan, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. Right. I think we got another couple of minutes and then.
I haven't been in England for such a long time. I think 20 years or 18 years, something like that. In a long
Wow, gosh.
Venezuelans were very rich and they didn't have any problem with the visas. Now it's difficult for us to get the visas.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Goodness. Do you come over to Europe much at all?
Yes, to Spain, quite often.
To Spain.
Yes. I love Barcelona.
Yeah. Spain is a fabulous country.
Yes. I wish I could have the opportunity to. I live in Spain for a while. I work in Spain. I was replicating my model in Barcelona, and I stayed there on and off for about 5 years. I have spent a lot of my life in Europe, actually.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you've worked and lived in so many countries.
No, not long periods of time, very short times. I've been at Viking for a long, long time too, and that forces you to go to many places.
Yeah. We're getting a comment from someone about whether we can see other people. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to see everybody, as this is a webinar rather than a Zoom call, just to answer the question in the chat. Yes, Salomon, you have a message that you need to make sure you're speaking into the microphone.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I make it 3 o'clock. So maybe we will start now.
Okay.
Welcome to everybody. I can see that we've got lots of people logging on, people from across the world. I can see from people from California and people over from Asia, it looks like. And so we have a very international group of people logging in today. Very exciting to be here with our speaker this afternoon, Salomón Raydan, who's joining us from Colombia. My name is Perdita Fraser. I'm on the board of the National Lottery Community Fund, and I am delighted to be here this afternoon discussing Salomon's inspirational community-based banking model that he has developed and spread across many countries. I've been invited by WEvolution and the David Hume Institute, who've jointly commissioned this series of international insights about systems changing programs and ideas from the global south. Can these ideas and solutions help other countries, and in our case, the UK, to recover and rebuild post-COVID? The movement, I'm just going to briefly introduce WEvolution and the David Hume Institute, because there may be a few people on this call who are not familiar with them. WEvolution is a movement of people who bring together, come together in self-reliant groups, close communities, often of women, who come together to support one another. They often save small amounts of money. They often meet regularly each week. Maybe they create connections and shared interests. And these could be around skills or craft building. Sometimes they're forming enterprises and money. It's a really powerful model of giving freedom and confidence and building a sense of community and self-worth amongst often disadvantaged communities. It builds on traditions from elsewhere, particularly, I understand, from India, where there are millions of such self-reliant groups. And in fact, I was hearing from Noel, who we'll talk to later on, that it's the 10th anniversary of WEvolution's first trip to India to visit these groups, which is a fantastic milestone to reach. WEvolution is growing across the UK and indeed spreading to other countries. So a real privilege to see the impressive growth that it has undertaken. This is the second in the series of these conversations held with the prestigious David Hume Institute, which is the home of rigorous and independent evidence-based policymaking analysis, in Scotland, and absolutely delighted to be in collaboration with the David Hume Institute. Just a bit of housekeeping. Salomon and I are going to speak for about half an hour, and then we'll have 15 minutes or so of questions. We'd love any people to interact with the chat. Unfortunately, we can't turn it on and have everybody able to be seen, but we would love you to let us know your name, where you are, tell us what you know about self-reliant groups, and ask any questions through the chat. And we will try and pose those questions to Salomon in the Q&A at the end. So let's move on. Salomon, you are the inspirational founder of the Bankomunales model. Can you start off by telling us how it started? Take us back to how you set off on this amazing journey.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to WEvolution people for the invitation. I'm really happy. I must start by saying that I do not speak English that fluently. So if I made mistakes and all that, please forgive me. Well, it started about 20 years ago in a small community in Venezuela, an indigenous community. I was asked by the government of Venezuela at that time to create a new financial model for peasants, for small farmers, because they were going through a very microeconomic reforms, and the institute they have to finance the peasants had to be closed. So I went to Central America and saw some ideas, but I brought back the idea of creating a very traditional microcredit programs. So we started to do a pilot project in an indigenous community. And when I was working on the community, I saw a group of women. There were 12 of them sitting in a sort of cycle, and they had a basket in the middle. And each of them will raise and put some money in that basket by turn. And at the end, a very, very happy woman took the whole money. And I was impressed. I haven't seen that before. I went and asked them what they were doing. And they explained to me that this was a very traditional system they use, in which each one will put a fixed amount of money each month. And by turn, each of them will take the whole amount of money. I was really impressed because I was bringing a microcredit program to finance very small amounts of money. And I found out that they have money. As a matter of fact, they were using their money in a wrong way, but they had the money. So it was that thing what really changed my life. I started to inquire and to see if that's something that particular for that community. And then I found out that it was used in many communities. And later I found out it was used in the whole world. It was a universal system that academically they call it rotating, creating, and saving associations, but have many different names. In India, millions of people. In Latin America, 100 million of people use that mechanism. But I understood they were using a very inefficient and a very not profitable mechanism to save. It wasn't just to have access to credit, but to save. And then I thought, well, if people are able to do this, to use mechanisms that are inefficient, insecure, to save, saving should be something really important. And then I started to really do my research. I understood that saving is the real need of poor people. We were doing a credit revolution where people were really asking for saving. So we decided to change that model, to improve that model, to make it profitable, to make it secure, to make it efficient, and to make it something that will teach people financial education. And that's how we created Bankomunales, actually. It's been a long time, and of course, a lot of changes, but the roots of that idea was there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What do you think, as you took it forward to the next stage, what were the lessons you learned in growing it? What became the sort of unique bit of your approach and your methodology?
Well, I think we were fighting two very important trends. One was the idea that credit is that microcredit was the industry. Microcredit was a real business. Microcredit was like, the panacea for all the problems of financial inclusion. So when you come with an idea of saving, which is not really a business, it's difficult to develop a business by saving. So that to fight against that, it was very difficult. And the other idea is that banking, formal banking, like if the policy to include people was to bring them and to open up saving accounts. That's so strong. It still is very, very strong in those countries. And I ask myself, who gets really happy because they have a bank account? Whose life has changed really dramatically because it opened up a bank account or a saving account? So the lesson is that when you have a trend, a very important trend, it takes too long to change that trend. And when that trend is a sort of something fancy, and a lot of people get crazy about microcredit or banking people, it's a really hard to change that mentality. We've been doing this for 20 years. And still, I think that even though we have created a revolution and we call it the saving revolution, it's still very far from catching up with what happened with microcredit, for example. Well, microcredit has still have to prove that it's really impactful. I am not that sure that has been that impactful. From my point of view, it might have been an historical mistake to develop ways in which people have access to credit, which is, I think, is very important. But if we have done the effort to develop saving mechanisms, different type of mechanisms, probably we will have impact a little bit more on poverty than what we have done with microcredit.
Yeah. And what do you think is the difference between your model as it now is and the rotating savings credit associations, the Roscoes that you mentioned, and
Yes.
the other informal schemes that you also mentioned from around the world? What have you
done
built into your system that makes you think it makes it better in terms of whether, you know?
One important change is that we don't save, we invest. Our people in our groups don't save, they actually buy shares, and those shares can make profits among the same group. So if you are someone who used the money, who put the money, and you are going to use it at the end of the year, inflation won't do any harm to your money. So we bring profitability or rentability to the money you use. So our model is based on investing rather than saving, which is a very important change because it also helps people to understand that financial money have a cost, and people change their mentality. I always explain this because I was visiting one Bankomunal in Venezuela, and when I was there, a very old man came to me and he said, "Wow, you are Salomon. You are the guilty one." And I said, what am I guilty about? And then he said, "Well, I thought I was going to die as a poor man, but now I am going to die as a banker." And that's a change.
So is it financial education? Do you think that is a core part of your model, that you're teaching people?
Exactly. We're teaching poor people to change mentality, emotional relation with money. Become bankers is not the same as be a poor man. That's a big difference. We also had a very important difference, which we don't use terms which are very inefficient. People, if it's your term and you don't get the money on that term by some reasons, probably you will lose the economic opportunity that you had and you were asking for the money at that time. So in our model, you don't need to have a term. You can use and borrow money whenever you need. So that's another important change. We bring efficiency. And the other thing, a very important one, is also that we make it very secure. The money won't ever be in the hands of just one person. The money will be spread in such a way that if you lose some money, there will be just a small part. So we say that we bring efficiency, we bring security, and we bring rentability or profitability to the saving. That will be the main differences.
Can you bring it to light by kind of giving us the story of a particular person?
oh, a particular person. Yeah, well, let's go to a particular community. When I started it, I started it in a beautiful island where I lived 20 years in Venezuela, which is called Margarita. And well, I started to visit the communities. Of course, the women, that was a fisherman community in which a lot of the fishermen go in long trips to fish, maybe 2 or 3 months. So the women normally stay there without money, begging for the husband to come back. And when they need some money, they will normally go into a money lender, a money shark. So I went there and I tried to convince them to create their own bank. Of course, they were very suspicious about me and asking them to put their money to create a bank. They thought, well, this guy is going to take all of our money. After a while, I was teaching them. They didn't have really money because the husband were on one of those fishing trips. So they make a fair and they started to sell things like cakes and empanadas and sweets and so on. And they collected an amount of money. It was about, I don't remember, but it should be about $50 or $70, something like that. There were 18 women and one man. Just one was a male. The rest were the wives of the fishermen. Well, that Bankomunal started with maybe $70. It lasted for almost 15 years, and it was able to raise about 100 people, members of the community. I can't remember the amount of money they use and reuse and borrow and save, but it should have been about maybe $2 or $3 million actually.
Wow, that is an amazing multiplier effect.
Because they were able to bring some other people, the fishermen, instead of, you know, spending the money early. I had a phrase actually from a man that said, you know, Bankomunales are so good that when I come from fishing, instead of drinking all the money, I buy some shares. And they make an amazing, huge Bankomunal that lasted many years. The point is that Venezuela went through a very hyperinflation process, and of course, it's not feasible to have a saving program with that. But I saw that community to change. I saw the sons of the fishermen to go and study university in the certain capital. I saw the women building and creating new business. I saw a hairdresser, for example, that when she bought the first credit she asked for was to buy a hair dryer. She never asked for something very, just a hair dryer. And when I asked her, what are you going to do? And then she said, I'm going to create a hair dryer shop. And she did actually. When I saw a young man buying flour, and then in 4 or 5 years, he had a bakery, a small one, but he have a bakery. That's the type of thing I have seen in a lot of the group we have created all over Venezuela and all over Latin America.
That is amazing. Can you, I mean, going back to sort of talking about the impact, just because you've described that community, I mean, that's astonishing numbers you've given us there. What would you say about sort of community resilience and the quality of jobs and things like and different groups of people, whether it's women or different sort of ethnicities within a community? How is it worked on impact in these areas?
We have measured impact in different ways, of course. We have about 3 years ago, we have, under the license of the University of Oxford, method called the missing dimensions of poverty. We measured some of our groups in Bolivia, in Venezuela, and in Haiti. And we found out that there were 4 very important indicators. One was social connection. The second one was what we call the ashamed of poverty, or being ashamed of poverty. That will change. Quality of job. And the third one will, and the fourth one will be empowerment, community empowerment, not just women empowerment, community empowerment. And allow me to explain to you with an example how it works. In that island in Venezuela, they elected a new mayor, and who was a very fat man, very used, very Latin American mayor. And when he won the election, the women went to present themselves and to present their organization, the Bankomunales. And when he saw the number of women, about 10 of them, when he saw the women coming, he raised the hands like that and he said, no, we don't have money. Don't come for money because we don't have money. Typically Latin American mayor. And then one of the women said, no, mayor, money we have. If you really want, we can lend you some. And that's what I call empowerment, community empowerment. If a community is poor, well, it's weak. But if they are able to handle and to have money, money brings power to the community. They are not begging. They are not asking the politicians to give them some money. They're on their own money. They have their own money. They are bankers. They have a bank. I mean, that's a big difference. If you always poor, always asking, waiting for some help from the politicians. And then you got your own money, you are able to tell the mayor, we can even lend you some.
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic story. And then economically, in terms of economic and financial impact, you've talked about the sort of social and community impact. But economically, I mean, I can imagine that you will have noticed substantial.
Absolutely. In a personal way, of course, a lot of people that have seen coming out of poverty and developing business, creating new jobs, repairing the houses, educating the kids and all that. But also, let me tell you an example. We made a pilot project in 6 Latin American countries about 3 years ago with the help of CAF, which is the Development Bank of Latin America. And we created 600 groups, more or less, in those countries. And in 2.5 years, they lended $7 million among them using their own money. And they save about $1.2 million. That's an incredibly amount of money. If you ask the government to do that, probably a Latin American government won't be able to have that money to spend in credits. They do it with their own money. And it's not rich community. We work in the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, very poor area. We work in El Alto, in Bolivia, which is also a very poor area. I mean, we're not talking about rich people. We're talking about people with very low income, and still they're able to raise that amount of money and to lend that amount of money.
Amazing. It's an extraordinary story. Your model is being used, as you've said, in many countries of Latin America, but as far afield, I gather, as Senegal, Indonesia, Germany. What have been, in your view, the key ingredients for successful replication in other cultures?
Well, I've been asked that question before. You got to have a model, something that's been systematized, something that is really like in a package, like a hamburger. You know how to make it. It's really good and it works and people like it. It's like having a hamburger, like having something well designed, something very well packaged so you can replicate it. In the second thing I will do is that package should be flexible enough for community to adapt to their needs and their abilities and capabilities. So it's flexibility to be adapted is the second thing I would say. And the third one is that people should find value on on the model. I mean, they have to find that this is useful for them, something that they're going to improve their life, something they're going to use because it's going to be good for them. If you have those three elements, I think you have a good chance to replicate something that is well packaged, something that could be flexible enough to be adapted to different realities, and also that people really find this is something good for us.
That's amazing. What would you say? I mean, I guess to look at the other look at it the other way. What do you think have been the biggest challenges? You know, you mentioned people have been overly focused on formal structures, like do people have bank accounts, or the microfinance model. But what can you kind of look broadly across the implementation in the many places where you've seen it replicated? What other challenges would you say we should look to prepare against if
well, regulations, financial regulation is very important in our case, because the regulation has been designed just to favor those with really a lot of money. I mean, to be a banker, you need to have a lot of money. So that if you regulation will always be a problem. It's very costly to study the laws and to really understand that you won't be breaking any law, so you can get help to spread your model. And I think formalization. I mean, the idea of the strategy just to really think of financial inclusion through creating or through bringing people into formality, I think is a really mistake. It's a very important mistake, because after maybe 40 years of trying to formalize people, most of the accounts are never used. I mentioned that before. 60% of the bank or the saving accounts in Latin America are never used. And on top of that, over 80% of the transactions do occur through informal mechanisms. They do
that's
not.
across Latin America, is it 80%?
I would say that's a figure for the world. I got the figure from a book called The Portfolio of the Poorest, which is a very deep and important investigation of how people do financial transactions in the poor communities. And that is still happening after so many years of trying to formalize people. I mean, it is ridiculous to ask someone who is poor to open up a bank account. That doesn't. Of course, if you do it by phone and and what is happening in some of the African countries is good, because you can transfer money to your friends, to your family, and that is good, and I welcome that. But that won't make any real big difference in the way people are living. I mean, I like to say the phrase, is it really that a bank account, a saving account, is going to make people happier? Are they going to improve their life because of that? But regulators and authorities are very, very much concerned about formality. I'm very much concerned, of course, and I understand. I mean, we got to protect the society from having mechanisms that are not very, that could be risky. But if you only think that in just in Latin America, 100 million people use informal mechanisms like rotating and credit saving association to save. Well, let's not be stupid. That is happening. Why don't we, instead of understanding the informality, transforming, improving it, we just deny it, like if it doesn't exist? That is crazy.
Yes. Well, it's, I mean, I guess if you were then to give advice to governments, if I was to appoint you as the advisor to the British government and other governments on how to improve financial well-being generally, and especially amongst the most disadvantaged communities. What advice would you give?
To spend money improving ways in which people could save. Get into your brain that saving is the real important need for poor people to get out of poverty. Credit is important, but saving is what should be done and had to be done for a long, long time. I mean, this is not new. If we have spent the amount of money we have spent it in trying to develop ways in which to bring a small microcredits to the population, if we have done something different, just to spend 10% of that, improving ways in which strategies for people to save, we would have made a big difference. And the other thing I think is very important is to understand how people spend their money, which is something we are working a lot on. We make an research on the people who have been teaching financial education for a long time. And we found out that a lot of their budget was spent in things like beers, rum, gambling, and sodas. And it's still going on. And then I asked to myself, how come that we have been teaching financial education and they're still doing the same? And then I was walking, and this actually happened. I was in Cali, in a shanty town in Cali. And when I was walking out of the house, they were selling beers in that house. And when I came to the next house, they were selling groceries, and were selling sodas, and they were selling, they had a gambling shop and all that. And then I thought, well, why is that people are having this type of spending? Basically because that's the offer they're getting. What else is gonna do? I mean, there has been large companies, very important one, spending money to develop ways in which deliver their products, packaging in such a way that people can buy for very small amounts. I mean, someone has done the job to really conquer those markets. We as a society haven't done anything like that. Why? How about if we change and we produce some new products and services that we call them poverty buffers? How about we make a different offer? So if you are a government or you are do those two small things, get together with good companies, deliver some new products and services, package them in a way that people could buy it, use channels, innovative channels, good, very different channels for people to buy that. Then people might change the way they spend their money. I don't blame the companies. I don't blame the large companies. No, honestly, I think they have done their. We got to do our job. An insurance company, for example, insurance are so important to get people out of poverty, but they don't go down. They don't go to the poor communities. They think they're gonna get the insurance just by saying, well, come and get an insurance policy. No, we got to do something different.
That's amazing. I mean, thank you for good recipes for government. In emphasis on savings, emphasis on innovation. Be like the companies. I mean, I guess Coca-Cola gets into every community. We need to get that sense of saving into every community.
Yes, and probably you could convince Coca-Cola to produce something different they can sell, because I'm not complaining because they are rich. I'm complaining the type of product they're selling.
Yes. We've got some time for some questions, and we've got a few questions have been coming in. We've got a question about how do you manage liquidity when people want their money back in the Bankomunales model?
That's a very important question. We cannot, because we don't have a bank core. I mean, we are not allowed to take any money. So what we do is that we have a balance between offer and demand. So if there is too much liquidity, the method won't let you buy more shares. You got to have a balance between offer and demand. So if we have a measure that says if you sell, if you are delivering 90% of the amount you have, you are able to sell more shares. If you are not delivering that figure, 90%, you won't be able to sell more shares.
Right.
The security of the model, it's based on the balance between offer and demand.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is. So it's not. I guess you're subject to the regulations that you can't act like a bank. You're not able to give that flexibility, but exactly. you are relying on the trust in the communities to keep that security and yes. to enforce sort of repayment, not enforce, but
as a matter of fact, I will tell you, if we had the opportunity to get the money that is normally that is not normally allocated or delivering credit, we should have improved more the savings of the people, but we're not allowed to.
Yeah. I've got another question here about how different is the system of Bankomunales from a standard credit union, which
credit unions are, yeah, probably you will find some similarities, but Bankomunales are small groups. They cannot be large. They have to trust each other. That's a very important element of the success of the group. I mean, the largest group we ever had were some in Venezuela, more than 100 people, and that's too long, too large, actually. We don't want to do that any longer. We will try to restrict the number in around 30, 35 people, no more than that. And it depends, of course, on the type of community. For example, we have a very large Bankomunal in a jail in Peru. That's more than 120 people, but they are in jail. I mean, they cannot go out. So it's and of course that can be done there. It has to be adapted to whatever community you are or society you are in. But credit unions are, as far as I know, very large.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I got another question here about specifically to Venezuela. After your story of the fishing community that faltered during a period of hyperinflation, are you seeing the Bankomunales model evolving and adapting to meet the needs of communities now facing economic challenge? And I've got another question, I guess, to add in there, which is how are you seeing the current economic challenges of COVID-19 and your Bankomunales models adapting to that? So maybe you could combine them the two, sort of a specific word about Venezuela and then a larger word about COVID-19's impact. Oh, have I lost you? Hello? Hello? Hi? Salomon?
We probably lost Salomon, who I think is zooming in from Bogota in Colombia. Is that right, Perdita?
Yes, I think that was where he said he was in Bogota, yes.
Yeah, well, it's a shame that if we lose him right at the end when he's supposed to answer all these important questions.
Yes, I was looking interestedly to understand about the impact of COVID-19, because I think in my conversation with him earlier this week, he was saying that one of the big issues facing the communities is a lot of this is the trust, and a lot of the financial transactions are happening traditionally in person. And COVID-19 has meant they've had to have, like we all have done, to adapt to new technology. And it's a fundamental issue because it is harder to develop trust amongst a group of people who don't know each other as well or at all online. I think everyone in the world is finding that.
Yeah, it is hard going. And just going back to what Salomon was speaking about, savings as one of those key mechanisms and the poor people's emotional relationship with money. I was just thinking that, in fact, WEvolution's work with SRGs across the UK has been around the discipline and the culture of savings, which in fact is a principle practiced by every individual and SRGs in our groups across the UK and the Rotterdam or Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And Purdy, I just wanted to check in with you. You are part of this whole scenario of financial inclusion. I wondered what was going on inside of you while you were listening to Salomon.
Well, it's an amazing story because with various different hats on, I think I've been looking at the issue of financial inclusion at the National Lottery Community Fund. We've been trying to address this issue in many ways, working out how to reach the most disadvantaged communities, the unbanked communities, what is the most effective way of building the trust and building the understanding of and giving people the skills to manage money, to not be afraid of money, and to not be afraid of numbers. There's a lot of the statistics on British numeracy are really terrifying. I think I was reading an article last weekend that said I think that we're possibly at the bottom of the OECD for numeracy, and in Scotland, for Scotland, that's particularly distressing because Scotland has this extraordinary history of fabulous education and specifically fabulous numeracy. And I think, unfortunately, I think Scotland has, I don't recall exactly the position of the individual countries of the United Kingdom, but it was not good. All four countries were not in a happy place in terms of familiarity with numbers, let alone understanding of financial options and having the confidence to deal with that. And then I've also been working a little bit with Edinburgh University, where I sit on the board. We're doing a lot of work with Scottish government and the UK government, using artificial intelligence to understand more about what policy tools would help with financial inclusion. So that's a really interesting new area. I think we have Salomon back.
Great.
Very good.
To all of us if we had lost Salomon forever here.
Yes. And Noel, you're going to tell us shortly about the next development for WEvolution and the next in the series.
Sure. Once we've heard from all about the wisdom from Salomon, then I'll come on.
Fantastic. Salomon, can you hear us? Oh, no, maybe not. Maybe Noel, do you just want to tell us a little bit about the next bit of the WEvolution series? While we wait for Salomon to sort out the technology.
Absolutely. I can do that very quickly. In the first instance, I'm sure all of us are enjoying this conversation with Salomon about the revolution around savings and investment in not only Venezuela, but so many other countries in Latin America. I know Salomon has said to me that his organization has been severely impacted because of COVID-19. And I'm sure there are people here who would want to know more about his work and also find ways to learn and also support him. And a comms officer will put his email ID in the chat box here. And Salomon said to me earlier, he'd love to hear from people here in Scotland and the UK about what's happening here, but also trying to understand about his work further. And the bit that WEvolution is working on also is around this profound element of a culture of savings in our communities and amongst our people. And we've tried to incentivize that ourselves through very small little financial innovations, a couple of them being the WeStart loans, which are probably one of the most markedly different loans in the market For example, I can't think of any lender who gives up to £1,000 completely interest free. And it's based solely on the savings principle within a group. And it's also for people who do not normally get a loan from any other lender in the market. We've also introduced trust money, which is up to £500 to every single SRG in Scotland for now, and later we will extend it to everyone in the UK, to every self-reliant group. Again, it's to supplement people's savings so that they could use it for internal group lending, often for consumption need or crisis, but also for enterprising needs. I want to announce two other bits, but I want you, Purdy, probably to go back to Salomon. I'm sure our participants here are eager to listen to him more than me at this stage.
I am sorry something went wrong with the internet. No idea what.
No problem. We were just asking you about the impact of economic challenge on the Venezuelan communities, and then also the impact of COVID-19 generally on the Bankomunales model. And if you could talk to us a bit about this in the...
One of the worst things that can happen to society is inflation, honestly. Inflation is a terrible, terrible damage to the economy. And we have a hyperinflation. I mean, our currency devaluates maybe 2 or 3 times per day, which is an amazing thing. It's one of the worst economies in the world. And inflation is like getting the money out of the pockets of people. You know, they become power and power and power every day. So what we're trying to do in Venezuela, which is not something well seen by the government, is to try to develop Bankomunales using a strong currency, probably a crypto moneda, a crypto coin, or the dollars. But people cannot save with a money, with a currency that is going to be devaluated 3 or 4 times per day. That's impossible. And the COVID has impacted very. We do have a system in which people got together. They have to gather. They have to sit in a meeting. And of course, for the last 7, 8 months, they haven't been able to do that. So they haven't been able to have their own meetings. And with our application, which is now that what we're using, has not the opportunity to transfer money digitally. No, you don't have a digital wallet. We are not a bank. So it's difficult for us to do that. But regulation won't allow us. So people still have to get together. We hope next year to develop the software for people can use our app and can transfer money to one another just by using the mobile phone. But we are not there yet. The COVID is going to make terrible for not just for the Bankomunales, it's going to be terrible for the whole Latin Americans.
Yes, well, I think not just the whole Latin Americans. I think it's been a we could start a whole new conversation on that. I think we should probably stick to this one. I had another question from someone asking which communities are the least able to save, and how can we change that?
Well, what we have learned is you can save very small amounts, but you can always save. The point is that we think of poor people like if they have nothing, or at least if they don't have much in a period of time. But a community is a mixture of things. It's very difficult when you have a community that only depends on one crop or one specific industry. People have different activities, even in very small, poor communities. So, probably, if you're a farmer, for example, you normally will have 2 or 3 different types of fields, or how do you say, or crops? Yes, 2 or 3 different types of crops. Maybe you do corn, but you also do carrots, or you do another vegetable. So in one time, you will have surplus. Sooner or later, you will have surplus. Because if you don't have surplus, you don't survive. Surplus what do you do with that surplus? If you think that people are going to put that surplus in a bank account, you're crazy. And if what they do with it is they put it under the cushion, they hire, the women's normal will hire it from the husband, because if he gets strong, he's going to get the money. So what we propose is to have a very a system in which those profits that you have, those surplus that you sometimes have, can be used by your neighbor, because your neighbor have a need in a different time. Maybe he doesn't grow corn. Maybe he's a shopkeeper, or maybe he's a government employee, or maybe he's a welder or whatever. So matching those surplus with those needs could create a very local bank, actually, in which you withdraw the surplus that one has and use it to finance the needs of your neighbor.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that's the genius of it, I think. And we had another question come in here asking what the difference is between a Scottish menage, which is a kind of friendly society, where a savings club, where the members decide by lot who's going to receive the contribution that's raised any week. But I think you've already described that this is that actually one of the successful things about your model is that it isn't automatically some decision by lot, and everybody has their opportunity, and then not for another a set period of time.
Exactly. I think that's very inefficient.
Yeah.
That has to be transformed, because that has been studied. And when you miss the economic opportunity, you're going to misuse the money. And that happens quite often, because probably when you wanted the money, 3 or 4 people didn't put the money that month. So you couldn't get the whole money, and your economic opportunities missed. And probably you will use the money for something that shouldn't be used.
Yeah. I mean, the absolute genius, I think, of what you're doing, and I think is at the bottom of a lot of what we're struggling with financial well-being, is the need to build community, to build trust, to build self-worth, and what your model is so brilliant at creating is all of these things wrapped into this savings revolution. And I think, I don't know, my observation as an observer only, but an interested observer with the various hats that I wear, is that it's such a genius model, because if you have building community and building trust but without any savings, you're not achieving this financial well-being. If you're doing the savings without building the community, you're not going to do that either. And I think it's this brilliant recipe that you have got, which has these various planks that have enabled your successful translation into so many different cultures. It's completely brilliant. I think the challenge we have is how to get governments on board, and how to, because they have the rigid structures you were talking about. I suppose maybe, I mean, we're going to run out of time soon, and I'm sure that Noel will want to come in with some final words. But what would you leave us with if we are sitting in our various communities across the world? What thoughts would you like us to walk away with?
I would say that community have the power and have the resources, and the human and the material resources to be their own bankers, to be honest. Even in very, very poor communities, you will have surplus that can be used by your neighbor. Create a local system, very efficient ones, that helps. Because poverty is not just the lack of money. It is one point. But poverty is also the different ways in which people get money. You might have you can have money on one time, and next one you won't have money. So we need to develop something like we have done that to balance the incomes. So when people get a fixed income, even if it's very small, they will get out of poverty. because they can plan the money, they can use the money efficiently because they know gonna get the money. The point with poetry is that you don't know if you're gonna have money next month or next week. So if you have a system in which you can somehow create the balance of the income in the family, and when you have surplus, you can use the surplus to save, and when you have need, you can borrow from that local mechanism. That will help a lot a community.
That's fantastic words from Salomon.
Really think community have more than you think.
Absolutely. Noel, do you want to come in with some final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Purdy. And thank you, Salomon, for giving us probably one of the most profound moments of this week, and to be ending this week on those thoughts.
Jesus, Noel, what those words sound really good. Thanks a lot.
I'm glad we can have a currency called profundity, at least as we are doing trust and savings and community. We are very grateful to you, Salomon, for your time with us all the way from Colombia. And we would love to keep our learning growing and going ahead, probably with some sort of a collaboration with you in the coming months and years.
Absolutely.
Purdy, thank you very much for hosting this conversation. And as you gave a hint to this immense work ahead of us about how to convince the UK government or even the Scottish government about this wonderful thing called savings, and how do we incentivize savings in our communities. One of the things WEvolution is setting out to do is on concluding this 4-part series of the Global South series, and today has been the second part. We will conclude these series in January. We will want to put out a little learning and action report for the Scottish government. And if you've been part of this conversation and you've got some ideas, your imagination is feeling stretched, you want to add something to this, please say yes in the chat box, and I'd love to invite you for a one-off conversation with a few of us, probably in a couple of weeks' time, and see how your imagination and your ideas about what we could be doing here in the UK, having heard Salomon, and we could put forward to the government in January. And the final bit to say is that this being the second one, the third part of the series will be on the 9th of December with Jyoti Mapsekar from Mumbai in India. Jyoti currently works with about 5,000 waste pickers, organizing them into incredible cooperatives, delivering services across an 18 million, 19 million people city. And I'm sure you'd be very impressed with her and her undertaking in India. Thank you very much for joining us today. As Salomon has said, and perhaps we could go off with this reminder that we do not need just a savings revolution, we need a savings and investment revolution, and one in which people of the poorest or the most disadvantaged don't just have a bank account, but that they can become bankers in their own right. Thank you. Have a happy and a healthy weekend ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salomon. Thank you.